So the first chapter we looked at when we started this series began with the Europeans coming over.
The Spaniards,
so,
yeah.
The Spaniards, and so now
we're jumping back to
chapter 2 and talking about what people were doing before the Spaniards got here.
Right.
And there is some farming going on? Or?
Well, as I said last week, prehistoric farming, and then we had some of those farms right near Tucson, farming area at the base of a mountain. And as a matter of fact, that's where Tucson gets its name, from a Tohono O'odham word, Chukson. And it means black at the base where it comes up. And it's referring to the lava rock at the base of a mountain. And there was a village there. And the village was there. They've done recent excavations. The Rio Nuevo project did excavations that found farming in that area as early as 2000 BC. And probably the earliest farming that's known just about anywhere, especially for tobacco and for corn.
Wow.
But they're still doing the recording. It's not official in journals, but by the time Father Kino got here in 1690, there was a village of about 800 people at the base of a mountain.
Wow. Because
there was water there, and they were irrigating their crops there.
And it's more than just farming. Weren't there some fairly developed civilizations?
Yes, after these that we're speaking of, about 300 AD for the most, 200 to 300 AD, three major civilizations that grew up in Arizona. To the north, we used to call those they're cliff dwellers, but we used to call them the Anasazi. But that's a Navajo word for the ancient ones or the ancient enemies. And it's not these are now called ancestral Puebloan, because they are the ancestors of the Pueblo Indians who live in New Mexico and the Hopi who live in Arizona. And so we have the ancestral Puebloans and their extensive cliff dwellings, monumental apartment complexes, 3 and 4 stories, and sometimes 1,000 foot up the cliff. So a series of ladders and toe holes and hand holes in order to get up to these. And they're quite a ways off the beaten path. And these were the Salado people. And also in northern Arizona, there's a pueblo called Wupatki and Lomaki, and those are Sinagua. But many cultures. And then in the southern part, where we are in Tucson, the Tucson area, the Hohokam Indians. And those are the ones who went before. And what they're known for is their irrigation canals. They dug hundreds of miles of irrigation canals, and in fact, the canals that come off of the Gila River and the Salt River, right about where the Gila and the Salt come together, and the Gila runs east to west across Arizona, about the bottom third of Arizona. And in fact, the canals that come off of the Gila River and the Salt River, right about where the Gila and the Salt come together, and the Gila runs east to west across Arizona, about the bottom third of Arizona. You have this river that starts in New Mexico and intermittently runs all the way to the Colorado River. And they dug hundreds of miles of irrigation canals off that and built many villages and pueblos and 3 or 4 stories apartment complexes. One of them is called Pueblo Grande, right out by the airport in Phoenix. And again, 900 people at least lived there. And all of these cultures seem to disappear around the same time, around 1300 AD, and 1200 to 1300 AD. And around in the 1860s, some settlers showed up and they dug out those canals again and started using them to grow crops to supply the army and to supply the miners at Wickenburg. And so one man there decided, we're building a new city on top of an ancient city, because we did have those Hohokam with all of these irrigation canals, and they dug those out, and some of them are still being used today. Some of those are still irrigation canals in the Phoenix area. So there was an Englishman named Darrell Dupa, and he knew classical mythology, and he knew about the bird, that famous Egyptian mythology of the bird that dies every 500 years, sets fire to itself in a nest made of cinnamon twigs and other things, and is reborn every 500 years.
Wow.
And so here we have an Indian civilization, 1200, 1300 AD, and then 500 years later, 1800, 1860s, a new city is being built there. So he named it after that bird, which is the phoenix bird.
Oh, for Pete's sake, I've never heard that.
That's how Phoenix got its name. And on their city logo, you have a phoenix with the flames coming up at the bottom. You have a bird with flames coming up at the bottom, because it's almost 500 years that it was reborn on top of these irrigation canals.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, it is.